This is the story of how, after I slapped my husband's mistress, he broke my leg and locked me in a storage room. So I called my father, a powerful Don. "Dad," I said, "leave no one standing in that family." It was our 3rd wedding anniversary. I wanted to surprise Alexander, so I wrapped up my appointments at New York Fashion Week early. When I opened the door to our Park Avenue penthouse, my stilettos made a sharp, crisp sound on the Italian marble floor. In the living room, a woman's stockings and lingerie were scattered everywhere. The trail led up to the 2nd floor, to our bedroom. My heart began to pound, and my palms grew cold and sweaty. But foolishly, I still held on to a sliver of hope. Maybe the housekeeper was just cleaning. That hope shattered the moment I heard familiar moans coming from the room. "Alexander, what if your wife suddenly comes back?" Clara's voice was sickeningly sweet. "Don't worry, baby. Sophia is in Manhattan for the week. She won't be back for another 2 days." Alexander's breathless response was filled with a passion I had never heard from him. And even if she did, what could she do? She's just some nobody who lives off my money. I stood outside the door, trembling from head to toe. Clara, my best friend from college, was sleeping with my husband in my own bed. My last 3 years, which I had dedicated entirely to that family, were reduced to nothing by Alexander, who painted me as a mere parasite. My patience snapped. I threw the door open with all my might. The horrifying sight of 2 pale, entangled bodies slapped me across the face. "Sophia." Alexander scrambled off Clara. Clara screamed and pulled a sheet over herself, but a defiant smirk played on her lips. "Sophia, listen. You don't understand." "Shut up." My hand landed on her cheek with full force. Clara's head snapped to the side, her perfectly sculpted nose now crooked, a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of her mouth. "Sophia, have you lost your mind?" Alexander leaped from the bed and punched me in the stomach. I doubled over in pain, but I angrily raised my head to glare at him. "Alexander, how could you do this to me?" "How could I?" He grabbed my hair and dragged me towards the stairs. "Who do you think you are? Just some small-time designer. Marrying me was the greatest honor your family could ever have. How dare you hurt Clara? Her father is the president of the Vance Group." Even as I felt my scalp being torn, I laughed. "Ah, so you cheated on me because her family is richer than ours. Have you forgotten who was by your side when you were starting with nothing?" "Shut your filthy mouth." In a fit of rage, he pushed me. I lost my balance and tumbled down the stairs. My right leg slammed against a decorative pillar at the corner, and a sickening crack was followed by a pain so intense my vision went black. "Stop your acting and get up." Alexander came downstairs and kicked my broken leg. I screamed, my back instantly drenched in a cold sweat. "Alexander, I think her leg is broken." Clara rushed down, wrapped in a sheet. When she saw the unnatural angle of my leg, her face went pale. "What a hassle." Alexander scowled. Then he grabbed me by the arm and dragged me towards the storage room. "Leave her in there to teach her a lesson. She needs to learn her place." I almost passed out from the pain, but I bit my lip to keep from making another sound. As I was thrown into the damp, dark storage room, I heard Alexander tell the housekeeper, "No one gives her any food for the next 24 hours. Let her think." The heavy steel door slammed shut, and darkness consumed everything. I huddled in a corner, my right leg swollen beyond recognition. The pain made me lose all track of time. How long had it been? I fumbled in my pocket and found my phone. Miraculously, it wasn't broken. At the bottom of my contacts was a number I hadn't called in 20 years. The saved name was just one word, Dad. I pressed the call button. After 3 rings, a deep, powerful voice answered. "Who is this?" "Dad." My voice was a hoarse whisper. "It's me, Sophia." There were a few seconds of silence on the other end. Then, the sound of a chair crashing and a panicked voice. "Sophia, where are you? What happened?" My husband broke my leg and locked me in a storage room. Each word felt like a knife in my throat. "Dad, help me." "Send me the address. I'll be there in 10. Before he hung up, I heard him shouting furious orders to get the cars ready. With a trembling hand, I sent the location and then started to laugh. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. Foolish Alexander thought I was just an ordinary designer. He never imagined who my father was. My mother had only revealed it to me on her deathbed. My father was Don Vincent Moretti, the head of the Commission, a powerful syndicate that controlled not just New York, but much of the East Coast's underworld. My mother, wanting no part of that world for me, had left him and raised me alone. I, respecting her wishes, had sworn to live a life free from my family's shadow. I hadn't even told my father about my wedding. What good was all that nobility now? Not even 10 minutes had passed when I heard hurried footsteps and the sounds of a struggle upstairs. Then, the storage room door was kicked open in a single blow. In the blinding light, a large man in a black suit approached quickly. "Miss Sophia, my name is Lucas. The Don sent me to get you." He knelt, examined my leg, and his face changed. Sons of bitches. As Lucas gently lifted me, I saw 2 unconscious bodyguards near the door. They were Alexander's men, posted to guard me. At the top of the stairs, Alexander and Clara were on their knees, held by other men in black suits. Their faces were masks of terror. "Sophia, who are they? What are you doing?" Alexander screamed as he struggled. Leaning weakly on Lucas's shoulder, I gave him a bloody smile. "Let me introduce you. This is my father's right-hand man. And as for who my father is, you'll find out soon enough, Alexander." As Lucas carried me towards a limousine parked outside, I heard Clara's hysterical cry. "Impossible. Sophia's father has been dead for years." Inside the car, a middle-aged man with silver-streaked hair waited anxiously. When he saw my pitiful state, a murderous glint flashed in his eyes. "Sophia, Dad will have the legs of those animals broken. All of them." His voice was as cold as ice. "And the Vance family? Leave no one standing." As Lucas carried me swiftly out of the storage room, the early summer sunlight was so blinding I couldn't open my eyes. I ground my teeth until I tasted the metallic tang of blood in my mouth, trying to endure the excruciating pain in my right leg. "Miss Sophia, just hold on a little longer." Lucas's voice was calm and strong. His scent, a faint mix of gunpowder, was strangely reassuring. Behind me, I could hear Alexander's shouts. "This is trespassing. I'm calling the cops. Sophia, who did you call?" I felt no need to look back. Lucas's men would handle him. The moment the limousine door opened, I came face to face with my father, Don Vincent Moretti, for the first time in 20 years. He looked older than I remembered, his hair almost completely white, but his eagle-like eyes, as sharp as a blade, hadn't changed. At that moment, they were fixed on my broken leg. "Sophia." My father's voice trembled slightly. He reached a hand towards me but stopped it mid-air. "Lucas, to Lenox Hill Hospital. Call Dr. Evans. Tell him to prep the operating room." I was carefully placed on the plush leather seats. My father used cushions to prop up my leg. He pressed a button, and a soundproof partition rose, separating us from the driver. "Who did this?" His question was clipped, but his voice was as frigid as an iceberg. "My husband, Alexander Blackwood," I said with a bitter smile. "He caught me cheating with my friend, Clara Vance." My father's gaze was like the sea before a storm, calm on the surface but with the power to destroy everything. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "I want a full background check on 2 people, Alexander Blackwood and Clara Vance. Vance is the daughter of President George Vance. All right, don't touch them yet. Wait for my order." He hung up and turned to me. "Why did you never call after your mother left? I never stopped looking for you." "Mom didn't want me involved in the syndicate," I answered softly. "I went to Parsons School of Design. I got a job at a prestigious firm. I thought I could live a normal life." A muscle twitched in my father's cheek. "And so you married an animal who breaks your leg." I couldn't answer. Outside the window, the city skyline blurred past, as fleeting as my 3 years of foolish marriage. At the VIP entrance of Lenox Hill, several doctors were waiting for us. Dr. Evans, the best orthopedic surgeon on the East Coast, personally pushed my gurney into the elevator. My father held my hand the entire time, right up to the doors of the operating room. His hand was rough but warm. The surgery was a success. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital room that looked like a suite at a 5-star hotel. My right leg was elevated in a cast. Outside the window was a breathtaking view of the city at night. My father was sitting on the sofa by the bed, reading documents under a lamplight. His profile looked particularly cold and hard. "Dad!" I called out weakly. He immediately put down the documents and came over. "How do you feel?" "The doctor said the surgery went well, but you'll need to stay in bed without moving for 2 months." "Thank you." I hesitated for a moment, then asked, "And Alexander and the others?" "Lucas has taken care of it." A deadly glint passed through my father's eyes. "That bastard husband of yours thought we were just some corner thugs. He kept shouting he was going to sue us." I laughed, but the wound made me wince. Poor, foolish Alexander. He had no idea who he had crossed. The Commission was a vast organization that controlled politics and the economy of the East Coast from behind the scenes. Even government officials didn't dare to oppose them. "Sophia, I want to hear your opinion." My father sat beside me. "According to the rules of the Commission, that bastard Alexander should be at the bottom of the East River by now." I closed my eyes, remembering the day I met Alexander. 3 years ago, he was a young entrepreneur just starting his business. He had waited outside my office for a month, claiming he wanted me to design his company logo. He said my designs had soul, that he'd never met a woman as special as me. I want him to experience a pain worse than death. When I opened my eyes again, a cold voice came from my lips. The Blackwood family, on the surface, is a construction giant, but behind the scenes, they built their fortune on loan sharking and illegal evictions. I want to see Alexander watch everything crumble before his eyes until he has nothing left, just like he did to me. A smile of satisfaction appeared on my father's face. He pulled a folder from his jacket. Perfect timing. "My men just discovered the Blackwoods are betting everything on the bid for the new Hudson Yards real estate development. The bid documents are full of inflated numbers." He flipped through the pages and pointed to one. "And the funniest part, your dear husband diverted $5 million from the company's funds to launder at a casino in Atlantic City, and he hasn't covered the hole yet." I took the documents, my heart starting to pound. With this evidence alone, I could send Alexander to prison. I could crash the Blackwood construction stock. "Dad, I need time," I said, taking a deep breath. "I'll pretend I've forgiven him. I'll go back to his house and gather more evidence." "It's too dangerous," my father frowned. "Please." I took his hand. "I want to destroy him with my own hands." After a long silence, my father finally nodded. "All right, but Lucas will stay by your side, 24/7." He pressed a buzzer, summoning Lucas, who was waiting outside. "From now on, my life belongs to Miss Sophia." Lucas knelt and handed me a special phone. "Miss Sophia, this has my direct line and the Dawn's emergency contacts. In any danger, press this red button and we'll be there in 3 minutes." I took the phone. Its weight felt like the key to a new life. At that moment, Alexander appeared at my door, his face a mask of terror. His suit was wrinkled, and he had deep dark circles under his eyes. He had clearly been sleepless for days. "Sophia." His voice trembled. He was holding a small bouquet of carnations. "I didn't know your father was Don Vincent Moretti." "Really?" I composed my face into a tired but forgiving smile. "I was wrong too, Alexander. I shouldn't have hurt Clara." Alexander rushed to the bed as if he had found a life raft. "Sophia, you forgive me? I was out of my mind." "Clara seduced me. I'll never do it again, I promise." Seeing his clumsy act, I felt like throwing up the soup I had just eaten, but the show had to go on. "Dad already gave you a good lesson. Let's forget about it," I said calmly. "When I get out of the hospital, we'll start over, okay?" Alexander, overcome with joy, nodded repeatedly. He had no idea that as he held my hand with his deceitful fingers, a hidden camera in the room was recording his every expression. On the day of my discharge, my father sent a Mercedes to take me to the Blackwood house. The scene was so grand it made the local news. Alexander turned pale when he saw Lucas himself pushing my wheelchair into the house. "If Miss Sophia gets so much as a scratch," Lucas whispered in Alexander's ear, in a voice just loud enough for me to hear, "the Don said he'll have you fed alive to street dogs." Alexander began to tremble so violently he nearly wet his pants. Returning to the place I had called home made me nauseous, especially the bed in our room. Even though Alexander had changed the sheets, I could still picture him rolling around in there with Clara. "Sophia, you rest. I have something to take care of at the office." Alexander handed me a glass of water and tried to leave quickly. "Okay, come back soon." I smiled as I watched him leave, then immediately poured the water into a flower vase. Lucas stood guard outside the door. I opened my laptop and started to work. As Alexander's wife, I knew the passwords to all his devices. Accessing his cloud account, I quickly found what I was looking for: hotel reservations from the past 6 months, bank transfers, and even some videos that were hard to watch. Scum. I smiled coldly as I saved the evidence. Just then, a new message popped up on the screen. "Clara, that bitch actually believed me. I'll wait for you at our usual spot. I miss you so much, baby." I stared at the screen and laughed out loud. "Alexander, you couldn't even last 3 days. Fine, that will make my revenge all the sweeter." I picked up the special phone and called my father. "Dad, I think we can start quietly buying up some shares in Blackwood Construction." "Yes," silently, without anyone knowing. After the call, I looked at the sunlight outside the window. I used to believe love was everything. I had willingly dimmed my own light to be Alexander's shadow. But now, that innocent Sophia was shattered, just like the bone in her leg. From now on, I would make everyone understand clearly the price of messing with the daughter of the head of the commission. "Miss Sophia, are you sure about this?" Lucas asked, standing by the door of the walk-in closet, his brow furrowed. I was adjusting my earrings in front of the full-length mirror. The woman in the reflection wore a deep red gown, her red lips as vivid as blood. The cast on her right leg was gone, replaced by a finely crafted metal brace that peeked out from the slit in her dress. Of course. I turned to Lucas. "The Blackwoods are having their anniversary party. How could I, the hostess, be absent?" Lucas opened his mouth to say something but closed it. For 2 weeks, since my return, I had outwardly reconciled with Alexander. But behind the scenes, through my father's connections, I had acquired 3% of Blackwood Construction's shares and contacted 2 smaller shareholders willing to sell. The phone vibrated. A message from my father. "Matthew Reed has arrived in New York. He will attend the party tonight as a guest, bringing what you need." A corner of my mouth turned up. Matthew Reed, the son of an old friend of my father's and a financial genius trained on Wall Street. He was the man in charge of the commission's legal investments. With his help, my plan would take flight. "Miss Sophia, the car is ready." Lucas handed me a silver USB drive. "The video you requested has been processed." I slipped the USB drive into my clutch. The cool metal glinted under the lights, just like my mood at that moment. The anniversary party for the founding of Blackwood Construction, which was also our wedding anniversary, was held at the Plaza Hotel. The moment I entered the ballroom on Alexander's arm, hundreds of eyes turned to me. Curiosity, surprise, and mostly a morbid anticipation, as if I were a circus act. After all, the gossip that a tycoon's daughter-in-law had caught her husband cheating with her best friend had spread like wildfire through high society. "Sophia, you look stunning tonight," Alexander whispered in my ear. His warm breath on my neck made me sick. I suppressed my disgust and smiled sweetly. "It's an important night. I can't embarrass you." Alexander breathed a sigh of relief. The sweet, understanding attitude I had shown him for the past 2 weeks, and even the fact that I had convinced my father to forgive him, had surely convinced him I had forgotten everything. What a fool. My in-laws approached, their faces plastered with forced smiles. After discovering my true identity, this social climbing couple's attitude had done a 180. "My dear, is your leg feeling better? Alexander has been so childish. We are so grateful for your understanding," my father-in-law said, rubbing his hands. I responded with a smile and scanned the room. I immediately spotted Clara standing by a pyramid of champagne glasses. She wore a white lace dress that made her look like a cheap wedding cake. She was giving me a look full of resentment. "I'm just going to see an old friend." I released Alexander's arm and, leaning on my cane, made my way to Clara. Her face paled, and she instinctively took a step back. "Clara, long time no see." My voice was neither too loud nor too soft, just enough for the few people around to hear. White suits you. You look just like that ghost you played in the college play." A few people around us couldn't help but chuckle. Clara's face went from white to crimson. "Sophia, don't be so arrogant. Alexander is only with you because he's afraid of your father." "Shh." I placed a finger on her lips. "On such an important day, let's not say things that will ruin the mood." I leaned close to her ear and whispered in a voice only she could hear, "There's a fun show later. Try to keep your composure." Before she could respond, I turned elegantly and came face to face with Matthew Reed, who had just arrived. He wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, and his eyes behind his gold-rimmed glasses were as sharp as an eagle's. "Miss Moretti, I've heard so much about you." He gently kissed the back of my hand. "The Dawn is very proud of you." "Mr. Reed," I smiled. "After the party, do you have time to talk? It would be an honor." We exchanged a silent promise and parted ways. The party began, and my father-in-law went on stage to boast about Blackwood Construction's achievements, not mentioning the $5 million hole in their funds. I, sitting at the head table, played the part of the perfect wife, maintaining a dignified smile and occasionally adjusting my husband's tie. Finally, I want to thank my daughter-in-law, Sophia, for her understanding and generosity. My father-in-law suddenly mentioned me. "Everyone makes mistakes when they're young. What matters is that the family stays united." And now, a toast to this beautiful couple. Everyone raised their glasses. I lowered my head to hide the disgust in my eyes. When I looked up again, I was wearing a loving smile. Alexander, moved, took my hand. "Sophia, I'll spend my whole life making it up to you." "You don't need a lifetime," I said softly. "You can start now." Leaving him with a puzzled look, I leaned on my cane and slowly walked onto the stage, taking the microphone from the host. "I thank you all for coming to our party despite your busy schedules." My voice was clear and resonant. "As a wife of this family, I've prepared a special gift." I signaled for the lights. The room dimmed, and a large screen slowly descended from the ceiling. Alexander's face went rigid, as if he had a bad premonition. "No, Sophia, please." He rushed the stage to stop me, but Lucas, who appeared suddenly behind him, gripped his shoulders with an iron hold. "Honey, just watch the show." I pressed the button on the remote. On the high-definition screen, the clear image of Alexander and Clara rolling around in my bed appeared, complete with explicit audio. In the bottom right corner, a timestamp was visible. It was from when I was in the hospital with a broken leg. They couldn't even last 3 days. The room erupted. Clara screamed and ran for the exit but was blocked by bodyguards. My father-in-law was livid, and my mother-in-law fainted. And that's just the beginning. I switched the screen. Bank statements and footage from casino security cameras appeared. My husband embezzled $5 million from company funds to gamble in Atlantic City. Because of this, the Hudson Yards project has stalled, leaving hundreds of families displaced and on the streets. Finally, I played a recording of a phone call between Alexander and a thug hired for the evictions. "I don't care if someone dies. Just clear that place out by tomorrow." A deafening silence fell over the room. I walked towards Alexander, who was now a crumpled mess, with each step. "In our 3 years of marriage, I brought you 7 major projects, and my designs won awards that raised Blackwood Construction stock by 30%. My voice was soft but as sharp as a knife. And in return, you gave me betrayal, violence, and humiliation." Alexander's legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees. "Sophia, I was wrong, but you forgive me, right?" I suddenly raised my voice, facing the stunned guests. "Because I am a wife who loves you so much." The room filled with whispers again. My father-in-law, as if finding a lifeline, rushed on stage and snatched the microphone from me. "A misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. As you can see, my daughter-in-law has already forgiven Alexander. And now, please enjoy the party." I elegantly stepped off the stage and, passing through a forest of complex gazes, made my way to the corner where Matthew was. He offered me a glass of champagne, his eyes behind his glasses glinting with admiration. A masterful performance. "It's just the beginning." I took a sip of champagne. "Did you bring the documents?" Matthew pulled a folder from his briefcase. the complete ownership structure of Blackwood Construction, and the real financial statements for the last 3 years. Much more interesting than the public reports. I opened the file. My eyes widened. Blackwood Construction's real debt was more than 3 times what was declared, and huge sums of money had disappeared through shell companies. This is enough for a short sell. More than enough, Matthew smiled. I've already contacted 3 specialized funds. They're just waiting for your signal. The party continued in a surreal atmosphere. Alexander followed me like a stray dog, constantly apologizing. I maintained a dignified smile the whole time, looking like a forgiving wife to her unfaithful husband. My dear, about the board of directors, my father-in-law pulled me aside, wiping cold sweat from his forehead. Don't worry, Dad. I held his arm affectionately. I've already told my father to stop buying up Blackwood Construction shares. We're family, right? My father-in-law breathed a sigh of relief. He had no idea that through an offshore company, I already owned 5% of Blackwood shares, and with the 8% promised to me by 2 small shareholders, I was now the 4th largest shareholder. At the end of the party, Matthew drove me home. Lucas sat in the passenger seat, never letting his guard down. Next week, Blackwood Construction's stock will plummet, Matthew analyzed. With the scandal you exposed tonight and the help of our funds, they'll hit their maximum drop for at least 3 consecutive days. Good, I said, watching the city lights flash by. When they hit bottom, we'll buy everything up. As the car stopped in front of the townhouse, Matthew suddenly asked, Have you really forgiven him? I smiled and pointed to my right leg, which still needed the brace. Mr. Reed, do you believe in turning the other cheek? No. Funny? Neither do I. Inside the townhouse, Alexander was kneeling in the living room, crying like a child. Looking down at him, I found the situation utterly ridiculous. This was the man I once loved, this coward, this spineless, pathetic creature. Sophia, I was wrong. I was really wrong, he sobbed, clutching my leg, smearing my expensive dress with snot and tears. I gently patted his head, like one does with a dog. Alexander, let's start over. He raised his head, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. But, I continued, I want to see your sincerity. I heard Clara's father is also bidding for the new North District development. Alexander immediately understood my intention. Tomorrow. I'll cut all ties with the Vance family tomorrow. Good boy. I patted his cheek a few times. Now, go to bed. You have to go to work tomorrow. After Alexander went upstairs, thanking me 1,000 times, I went into the study and locked the door. I called my father. Dad, it's time for the next step. Yes, I need evidence of the Vance family's illegal activities. After hanging up, I opened the computer and re-watched the video from the party. The image paused on Alexander, kneeling and begging for forgiveness. I hit the delete key without hesitation. This was just the beginning, my dear husband. You're about to learn that losing everything is the real pain, far worse than any physical wound. On the morning of the 3rd day after the party scandal, I sat at the breakfast table, elegantly eating Greek yogurt with berries and honey. The brace on my right leg had been replaced with a lighter model. Alexander came down the stairs, his tie crooked and deep, dark circles under his eyes. Coffee? I offered him a cup of hot latte. He looked at the cup suspiciously and didn't take it. No, thanks. I have to get to the office. I shrugged and took a sip. Alexander's behavior over the past few days had been rather amusing. In public, he was subservient to me, but when we were alone, he wouldn't touch any food I had handled. Lucas's warning had certainly had an effect. Oh, by the way, I stopped him as he was about to leave. There's a charity auction at a club downtown tonight. I donated your Patek Philippe. Is that okay? Alexander's face went rigid. That watch had belonged to his grandfather. I know. It's a limited edition. I smiled sweetly. That's why it will fetch a higher price, right? The news is already out in all the papers. The young heir of Blackwood Construction donates a family heirloom to help those in need. He clenched his fists, then forced a smile that was worse than a grimace. Of course, that's fine. As I watched him flee, I checked the security cameras on my phone. The moment he got into his car, Alexander was on the phone, 9 times out of 10 complaining to Clara. After I exposed their scandal at the party, they had officially broken off contact, but secretly, the phone vibrated. A message from Matthew. The funds are ready. The market opened this morning with Blackwood construction stock hitting its maximum drop. A corner of my mouth turned up in satisfaction. The party video had gone viral, and the hashtag #Blackwood scandal was the #1 trending topic. The board of directors had requested an emergency trading halt, but they couldn't stop the stock from plummeting. Lucas appeared silently at the door. "Miss Sophia, the car is ready. Today, we're first stopping by the clinic for a checkup, and then we're going to the investigative agency my father recommended." In the clinic hallway, I ran into an unexpected person. Clara, hidden behind sunglasses and a face mask, was furtively exiting the gynecology department. I quickly ducked behind a corner and secretly took a picture of the receipt she was paying. Positive pregnancy test. Zooming in on the photo, I couldn't help but smile. It seemed Alexander's penance on the night of the party had borne fruit. In Clara's womb, a little bastard was indeed growing. After the checkup, I told Lucas to drive to a nondescript office building on the outskirts of the city. An elevator took us to the top floor. When the doors opened, an office filled with electronic equipment appeared. A skinny man in a checkered shirt was staring intently at 6 monitors simultaneously. "Miss Moretti, I'm Kane," he said without turning around. "The things the Don asked me to find are all here." Kane played some security camera footage. The videos showed Alexander and Clara meeting at a motel outside the city. It had happened just the previous afternoon. But there was something more interesting. Kane switched screens, showing Clara's father, George Vance, and Alexander's father, Vittorio Blackwood, meeting secretly at an exclusive private club. They meet here regularly on the 15th of every month. They've been doing this for at least 5 years. I narrowed my eyes. Is it possible to record their conversations? "A bit difficult," Kane said, scratching his head. "The security at that place is tight. Use this." I pulled out a fountain pen my father had given me from my bag. The next time they meet, bribe a waiter and have him slip it into George Vance's pocket. Kane took the pen, his eyes lighting up. A state-of-the-art micro-spy device. I didn't know the Don had access to these things. Leaving the agency, I called my father. "Dad, Clara is pregnant." "No, don't touch her yet. That child might be useful." "Oh, and George Vance and my father-in-law meet regularly. Something is suspicious." There was a silence on the other end. "Sophia, the relationship between the Vance and Blackwood families might be more complicated than you think. 20 years ago, what happened?" When I pressed, my father answered in an uncharacteristically hesitant voice. "I'll investigate further and let you know. Tonight at the party, be careful with Clara." Hanging up, I fell into thought. My father was clearly hiding something, and I instinctively felt it was related to my mother. That evening, I wore a dress from Chanel's latest collection and asked the makeup artist for a beautiful, yet fragile look. Elegant, but pitiful. Lucas handed me a jewelry box. The Don sent this. Inside was a diamond necklace with a rare black pearl in the center. I remembered seeing that necklace in a photo of my mother. At the club entrance, Lucas asked, "Miss Sophia, do you want me to come in with you?" "No, wait in the car. I toyed with the black pearl around my neck. I can handle tonight's show." The charity auction at that exclusive club was always a major event for high society. As soon as I entered, the noisy room fell silent. Then, whispers erupted from all corners. "That's the Blackwood construction daughter-in-law. They say her father is a boss who controls half the East Coast, that Alexander must have been blind to fall for someone like Clara Vance." I pretended not to hear and made my way to my reserved seat in the front row. The moment I sat down, a strong scent of perfume assailed my nose. "Sophia, it's been a while." Clara approached me, also wearing a white dress, intentionally showing off her slightly rounded belly. "I hear your leg still isn't better." "What a shame." I smiled and glanced at her belly. "You must be about 3 months along. You should be careful at the beginning of a pregnancy." Clara's face stiffened slightly. She hadn't expected me to know about her pregnancy. "Alexander is thrilled about this baby." She lowered her voice, her eyes glinting with malice. "He said he's going to divorce you as soon as I give birth." "Really?" I took out my tablet and played a video. "Then how do you explain this conversation from yesterday afternoon?" In the video, Alexander was neurotically pulling his hair. Why did a child have to come now? My father doesn't want to see you. The company stock has collapsed. If that crazy bitch finds out we're still seeing each other, it's over for me." Clara's face turned ashen. "How did you—" "The curtains of room 308 at that motel weren't even closed properly," I sighed slightly. "If you're going to cheat, at least learn the basics, my friend." The people around us didn't understand our conversation, but Clara's near-fainting expression drew everyone's attention. I stood up and deliberately raised my voice. "Clara, you don't look well. Should I call a doctor for the baby you're carrying?" "What? Clara Vance is pregnant? It must be Alexander Blackwood's." The nerve, the whispers spread like a wave. Clara, in a panic, tripped over her own dress and fell heavily in front of everyone. As she shakily got to her feet, a large, bright red bloodstain spread across her white dress. "Ah, my baby!" she screamed hysterically. I watched the scene with cold eyes and called 911. Tonight's show had gone even better than expected. Not only was Clara humiliated in public, but she had revealed her own pregnancy. Tomorrow morning, the gossip columnists would have plenty to write about. Before the ambulance arrived, I made sure to call Alexander for Clara. Alexander's first reaction to the news that his mistress had miscarried was, surprisingly, "Damn it, my father is going to kill me now." Hearing those words, Clara fainted. Of course, I didn't stay for the auction. Back at the Blackwood house, I found Alexander in the study, furiously destroying everything. When he saw me, he rushed at me with bloodshot eyes. "What did you do to her?" I blinked innocently. "Everyone saw it. She fell on her own. By the way, your words at that motel were truly touching." Alexander froze, as if struck by lightning. "You spied on me." "That doesn't matter," I said, sitting down elegantly. "What matters is that I've decided to help you two get together. Let's get a divorce." I dropped the word casually. "I'm tired of this sham marriage." A flash of greed lit up Alexander's eyes, quickly replaced by suspicion. "On what terms?" "For old time's sake, I'll only take what's mine." I opened a document I had prepared. "This house will be mine, and you will give me 5% of the company's shares." "In your dreams," Alexander stood up. "Do you know this house is worth $10 million, and the shares? Don't even think about it." I sighed and pulled a small stack of photos from a drawer. "Then these photos will be in every newspaper tomorrow morning." The pictures showed Alexander not only with Clara, but with at least 3 other women. The most damning was a photo of him gambling at the Atlantic City casino with members of a local syndicate. You... Alexander's face turned gray. "You have 3 days. Think it over." I put the photos away. "Oh, by the way, even though Clara lost the baby, your father will be pleased. He despises the Vance family." "No." Alexander suddenly raised his head. "How did you know my father hates the Vances?" "Just a guess," I smiled. "Otherwise, why would he forbid you from seeing her?" Alexander looked at me with suspicion, then stormed out, slamming the door. I immediately called the investigator. "Kane, I want you to dig deep into the relationship between Vittorio Blackwood and George Vance, especially the events of 20 years ago." After the call, I opened my computer to review my day's winnings. According to Clara's medical records, not only had she miscarried, but the shock had damaged her uterus, making future pregnancies difficult, an unexpected bonus. The phone vibrated, an audio file from my father. I put on my earphones. I heard George Vance's angry voice. "Vittorio, have you forgotten what happened 20 years ago? If I hadn't disposed of that body for you..." The recording cut off abruptly, but the content was shocking enough. Vittorio was my father-in-law's name. The word body sent a chill down my spine. Then a message from my father arrived. "Sophia, come see me tomorrow. There are things I need to tell you." I stared at the phone screen, my heart pounding. What happened 20 years ago? Whose body was it? Was it related to my mother's sudden death? Outside, a bolt of lightning split the night sky. My reflection in the window was pale and cold. In my eyes, the fire of revenge burned brightly. "Alexander, did you think the divorce was the end?" "No. It was just the signal for the next act of my vengeance to begin." My father's estate was nestled in the heart of a dense Hudson Valley forest. In front of the gate, surrounded by high walls, stood 2 bodyguards in black suits. Throughout the entire drive with Lucas, I kept thinking about that recording. Disposed of the body. Those words were stuck in my mind like thorns. "Miss Sophia, we're here," Lucas reminded me softly. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My father was pruning his old olive trees in the garden. Each of his movements was precise and measured, exuding a quiet strength. He didn't look like a man his age. "Sophia." He stopped and motioned for me to follow him inside. My leg was better now. I could walk without a cane. I followed him into his study. The air was thick with the scent of tobacco and old leather. The study was exactly as I remembered it. Even the Celadon ceramic vase, my mother's favorite, was in its place. My father took a yellowed envelope from a safe, his expression serious. 20 years ago, when your mother left me, she was already pregnant with you." "I know," I nodded. "But you don't know why she left." My father took out a faded photograph and pushed it in front of me. "Look at this man." In the photo, a young Vittorio Blackwood was posing in front of a construction site with an unknown man. They were holding champagne glasses, and behind them was a banner that read, "Blackwood Construction Site Inauguration." The unknown man had his arm around my father-in-law, smiling broadly. "Who is this man?" I frowned. "George Vance's brother, Claudio Vance." My father's voice was as cold as ice, and he was also the man who killed your mother. I dug my nails into my palm without realizing it. What exactly happened back then? Vittorio Blackwood and the Vances were collaborating on a redevelopment project using illegal evictions. During one of those, someone died. Claudio Vance killed a protester by beating him. My father produced another document. Your mother photographed the evidence and wanted to report them. The document contained several blurry photos. Claudio Vance was holding an iron pipe, and on the ground lay a resident, covered in blood. The date on the photo was 1 week before my mother's death. Claudio Vance found out and went to her apartment. My father's voice trembled slightly. When I arrived, it was too late. I stared at the photo, my vision blurring. The truth about my mother's death, which at age 5 I was told was an accidental fall, was so horrific. The police closed the case quickly, due to pressure from the Blackwood and Vance families. And Claudio Vance? My voice was a hoarse whisper. "He died," my father sneered. 3 days after the funeral, in a car accident. I suddenly looked up. My father's gaze told me everything. It wasn't an accident. Vittorio Blackwood and George Vance covered everything up, my father said, arranging the documents. For years, I gathered evidence, but they were too deeply entrenched in politics and business, until I married Alexander. That's when I understood my father's silence. He was waiting for me to discover the truth on my own. "I didn't want you to be blinded by revenge," he sighed. "But now, you have your own reasons for vengeance." I stood up and walked to the window. The pine forest swayed in the wind, like the whisper of countless suffering souls. My mother, so gentle, who had taught me how to draw, had died so cruelly. "Dad, they will pay in blood." I turned around, my voice strangely calm, not just Alexander, but the entire Blackwood and Vance families. A glint of satisfaction flashed in my father's eyes. "Do you have a plan? First, we need to turn them against each other." I opened my phone and looked at a report that had just arrived from Matthew. The substandard steel used in Blackwood Construction's Hudson Yards project was supplied by a shell company managed by George Vance. My father's eyes lit up. "You want them to tear each other apart." "The media is ready," I said, looking at my watch. "In an hour, the news about the collapse risk at Hudson Yards will be on the front page of every business newspaper." My father offered me a glass of whiskey. "As for Vance, I've already tipped off the FBI to raid his containers of smuggled goods at the port. They'll move tonight." The glasses clinked with a crisp sound. In that moment, I was my father's heir, no longer the foolish woman crying in the cage of a marriage. Leaving the estate, Lucas handed me an envelope. "Miss Sophia, these are internal documents from Blackwood Construction that Kane found." As I flipped through the confidential documents, I smiled unknowingly. Alexander's embezzlement was worse than I thought. Not only had he lost at gambling, but he had also forged the board of directors' minutes to secretly mortgage the company's main assets. "Lucas, we're not going back to the townhouse. Take me to the Blackwood Construction headquarters." I had suddenly changed my mind. It was time to pay my dear husband a visit. In the boardroom on the top floor of Blackwood Construction headquarters, an emergency board meeting was underway. Through a secretary infiltrated by my father, I was receiving real-time updates. The Hudson Yards collapse risk is an accident. The media is exaggerating. I heard Alexander's voice through my earpiece. He was already in a panic. The priority now is to stabilize the stock price. Director Blackwood, the problem isn't just the media. It was an old man's voice, Director DeAngelis, a company veteran. According to the safety report that just came in, all the materials failed inspection. The supplier is an affiliate of the Vance Group. How do you explain this? I don't know anything about that, Alexander said, clearly panicking. That's the purchasing department's responsibility. The head of the purchasing department is your cousin, DeAngelis replied coldly. The board demands a full inspection, including the destination of the $5 million you spent. I heard the sound of a cup shattering and Alexander's shouts. I turned off the earpiece and cheerfully rode the building's elevator to the top floor. When I opened the boardroom door, all the directors turned abruptly. Alexander was standing in front of the chairman's seat, his face livid, his tie crooked. He looked like a defeated rooster in a cockfight. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, smiling as I headed for an empty seat. That seat was mine, acquired through the shares my father had obtained via a shell company. As a shareholder, I want to know what measures you plan to take for the Hudson Yards project. Alexander's eyes looked like they would pop out of their sockets. "You? How? Madam, you may not be aware," DeAngelis said, standing to greet me. "From preliminary investigations, it appears the incident was due to a problem with the materials, and the supplier in question has close ties to the Vance Group." "Oh, what a coincidence," I said, feigning surprise. "My father just received information that the FBI is raiding the Vance Group's smuggling warehouse tonight." The boardroom erupted. Directors whispered, and some pulled out their phones to make calls. Alexander's face turned gray. He knew better than anyone about the dirty dealings between Blackwood Construction and the Vance Group. "Gentlemen," I raised my voice, "I propose we establish an independent investigation committee to thoroughly review all transactions between our company and the Vance Group. Furthermore, given Director Alexander Blackwood's current unstable state, I request his duties be temporarily suspended." "You fucking bitch!" Alexander lunged to grab me, but his bodyguards held him back. "Calm down, honey," I said calmly. "It's for your own good. Imagine if your gambling debts in Atlantic City went public, or the documents where you mortgaged company assets." Alexander gasped for air like a strangled chicken. Only then did he seem to understand that the cards I held were not just evidence of his infidelity. The board approved my motion by a huge majority. Leaving the building, the sky was as red as blood, like the fate of this city about to be overturned. The phone vibrated. A message from Matthew: short sell successful. 60% drop in Blackwood stock. Acquired 11% of outstanding shares. Immediately followed by a message from my father: FBI operation successful. George Vance, taken in for questioning. I took a deep breath and got into the car. Lucas handed me a cup of hot tea. "Miss Sophia, shall we return to the townhouse?" "No." I didn't finish my sentence before I noticed a black SUV in the rearview mirror. It had been following us since we left the company. "Lucas, we're being followed." Lucas's gaze hardened. He pressed a button on his earpiece. "Team 2, checkpoint, black Range Rover, license plate Romeo Golf Hotel 134. Check it." Not a minute passed before the reply came. "Plate is fake. But the face captured inside is the head of security for Blackwood Construction, Alexander's man." I narrowed my eyes. When a fox is cornered, ditch them and head for the safe house. Lucas made a sharp turn, and the car entered a narrow alley. The SUV followed us. The two cars engaged in a silent chase through the sunset traffic of New York City. "Miss Sophia, hold on tight." Lucas pressed a red button on the center console. A large amount of smoke billowed from the back of the car. Taking advantage of the pursuer's obscured vision, Lucas made several sharp turns and drove into the underground parking of a mall. We switched to another prepared vehicle and exited quietly through the rear. I saw the SUV still circling the parking lot entrance. Alexander is starting to suspect you. Lucas's voice was tense. Do you want me to tell the Don to send someone to take care of him? No, let him be, I sneered. I need to make him understand clearly that I am not an easy target. The safe house was a secret apartment my father had prepared on the Upper West Side. As soon as I entered, I opened my laptop to check the latest developments. The financial news was full of the Blackwood construction scandal. On social media, the hashtag number Blackwood collapse was trending. The most interesting news was George Vance's arrest, spreading like wildfire. It was even rumored he had smuggled not just luxury goods but also drugs and weapons. The Vance Group website was shut down and its stock suspended from trading. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was Alexander. I let it ring more than 10 times before answering. Sophia, is this your doing? His voice was a hoarse whisper. From the background noise, he seemed to be in a bar. I don't know what you're talking about, honey. I put him on speakerphone and continued to review documents. Don't pretend. The board, the stock, the Vances, it's all your doing. What do you really want? He screamed hysterically. For you to feel what it's like to lose everything. My voice was as light as a feather, just like you did to me. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then, the sound of a glass shattering, and Alexander's screams. You'll see, you bitch. I'll make you experience a pain worse than death. The call ended abruptly. I shook my head and called Matthew. Continue buying up Blackwood construction shares and spread the rumor that George Vance is selling all his shares to pay the smuggling fines. Already on it, Matthew laughed, and we discovered that Vittorio Blackwood has a secret account in Switzerland. For the last 5 years, a fixed amount has been deposited every month. The beneficiary is Clara Vance. This unexpected information made me raise an eyebrow. My father-in-law was sending money to Clara every month. Why? Find out the reason for the transfers, and let's prepare the next plan. We need to deliver a very big gift to Vittorio Blackwood's birthday party. After hanging up, I went to the window. The night was as black as ink, but in the distance, the lights of the Blackwood construction building still shone. By sunrise, however, the owner of that building might change. Alexander, did you think breaking my leg was the end? No. I'm going to break the spine of your entire family. The night before Vittorio Blackwood's 70th birthday, I was in my walk-in closet, trying on a dress in front of the mirror. A champagne-colored gown that beautifully highlighted my waist. The scar on my right leg was barely visible. Lucas knocked and entered, holding a velvet jewelry box. The Don sent this. He said it would go well with your dress tomorrow. Inside was a diamond necklace. In the center, a rare red diamond emitted a blood-red light. I recognized that jewel. It had been my mother's favorite when she was alive. Where is Dad? I touched the red diamond. It was cold as ice. He's waiting for you in the study. Mr. Reed is there as well. I put on a dressing gown and walked barefoot to the study. When I opened the door, Dad and Matthew were talking over an architectural plan. Matthew was in an impeccable suit, his eyes behind his gold-rimmed glasses as sharp as an eagle's. When I entered, he nodded slightly. Miss Moretti. Sophia, come look at this, Dad called me over. The real plan for Blackwood Construction's Hudson Yards complex doesn't show the luxurious residential complex that was advertised, but a dense cluster of small apartments. The building density exceeds regulations, and the green space has been halved. Vittorio Blackwood deceived the city. Matthew pointed to a stamp in the corner of the plan. This is the final version, and work has already begun. If this goes public, the entire project will get a demolition order. Blackwood Construction will suffer a loss of at least $1 billion, I continued the thought. My father handed me a USB drive. Tomorrow's birthday gift is ready, and there's something even more fun. I plugged the USB into the computer. A bank statement appeared on the screen, from my father-in-law's Swiss account. Over $5 million had been transferred to Clara Vance every month, regularly, for the past 3 years. The reason was always listed as support, but the last transaction was for medical expenses. The date was the exact day of Clara's miscarriage. My father-in-law knew about Clara's pregnancy, I frowned. Matthew opened another file. That's not all. From Clara's medical records, it turns out that during the period of conception, Alexander was on a business trip in Africa. The dates don't match. My eyes widened. Then that child. The most interesting part, Matthew said, adjusting his glasses, is that Vittorio Blackwood, despite knowing all this, helped Clara hide the truth. My father sneered. The relationship between Vittorio and Clara may not be as simple as father-in-law and daughter-in-law. This information made me sick. The Blackwood family was even filthier than I had imagined. Tomorrow at the birthday party, all the media will be there. I closed the laptop. It's time to give the Blackwood family a very big gift. The next day at noon, the Blackwood villa was decorated for a party, and luxury cars arrived one after another. I entered the hall on Alexander's arm, playing the role of a loving couple. Since his suspension, Alexander had become as docile as a stray dog. He couldn't even look me in the eye. "My dear, you've arrived." My father-in-law greeted me, his face beaming. His gaze briefly landed on the red diamond necklace around my neck, and his expression stiffened slightly. "This necklace was my mother's," I smiled sweetly. "I see you remember it, Dad." My father-in-law tried to remain calm and escorted us to the head table. High-ranking government officials and bank directors were there. I noticed Clara was also present. She wore a simple white dress and sat in a corner, her belly flat and her face pale. When she felt my gaze, she lowered her head and started fiddling with a napkin. The party began, and the host announced the time for speeches. My father-in-law went on stage with a beaming face to boast about Blackwood Construction's achievements, not saying a word about the recent scandals. There was applause, as if the stock market crash and the construction site disaster of a few days ago had never happened. Finally, I want to thank my daughter-in-law, Sophia, for her understanding and generosity. My father-in-law raised his glass. There was another round of applause. I stood up elegantly and walked towards the stage. Alexander desperately tried to grab my dress from under the table, but I gently sidestepped him. "Dad, you were magnificent." I took the microphone. "As a daughter-in-law of this family, I've prepared a special birthday gift," I signaled to Matthew. As he fiddled with his laptop, the hall's screen slowly descended. My father-in-law's face went rigid, as if he had a bad premonition. "First, let's look at the real plan for Blackwood Construction's Hudson Yards complex." I pressed the button on the remote, and a murmur spread through the hall. The real plan was completely different from what was advertised. Several government officials suddenly turned pale. "President Blackwood, what is the meaning of this?" The director of the construction department shouted, standing up. "A misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding." My father-in-law rushed the stage to snatch the microphone, but I quickly dodged him and moved to the next screen. And now, the bank statements from President Vittorio Blackwood's Swiss account. For the last 3 years, he has transferred over $5 million per month to Miss Clara Vance. With the clear bank records projected on the screen, a deafening silence fell over the hall. Clara screamed and ran for the exit, but was blocked by bodyguards. Finally, my voice suddenly turned sharp. "Miss Clara Vance's pregnancy certificate. Calculating the period of conception, my husband was on a business trip in Africa." "Nonsense." Alexander stood up. "I also have the DNA test results." I calmly projected the last slide. "Honey, that child wasn't mine." The hall exploded as if hit by a bomb. Alexander rushed the stage like an enraged lion, but Lucas blocked him. My father-in-law, his face ashen, dropped the glass he was holding. "And there's something even more fun." I raised my voice and played a recording. In the recording, my father-in-law tells Clara, "Have the baby. We'll make sure Alexander accepts it as his." The Vance family really needs this child to inherit Blackwood Construction. Hearing those words, Alexander turned and punched his father in the face. "You old bastard!" The situation spiraled completely out of control. Directors stormed out of the hall. Bank directors tore up the loan contracts they had prepared. Journalists snapped photos relentlessly. I elegantly descended the stage and, amidst the gazes of shock and admiration, walked out of the hall. Behind me, I could hear Alexander's screams and my father-in-law's sobs. Clara had collapsed on the floor, but no one paid her any attention. I got into the waiting car and took a deep breath. "Miss Sophia, where to?" Lucas asked. "Let's go to the clinic." I looked at my phone. Clara's latest medical records had arrived. I wanted to see her in person. Halfway there, Lucas suddenly swerved. "Miss Sophia, we're being followed again." With a sharp screech of tires, our car slammed into the guardrail. I was thrown from my seat, my forehead hitting the back of the front seat. I saw stars. Through the rear window, I saw a black, license plate-less SUV rapidly approaching us. "Get down!" Lucas pushed my head down. The SUV rammed us again, this time on the passenger side. At that moment, 2 motorcycles appeared, and their riders shot out the SUV's tires. The SUV lost control, spun several times, and crashed into the guardrail. The Don's men. Lucas reversed and sped away from the scene. "Are you okay?" I held the lump on my forehead and smiled coldly. Alexander is really getting desperate. Back at the safe house, I immediately called my father. "Dad, Alexander sent his men." "No, I'm fine. I got away." After the call, I checked the security cameras. As expected, at the Blackwood Villa, Alexander and Clara were fighting furiously. "It's all your fault! Now that bitch has won, we're finished!" Alexander screamed. Clara sneered. "That's not what your father said when we were in bed together. You Blackwoods are all the same." "Shut up!" Alexander put his hands around her neck. "I'll kill you!" Clara struggled and, with a fruit knife she grabbed from a table, slashed Alexander's face. He screamed and let her go. Clara seized the opportunity to flee the room. I turned off the cameras, lost in thought. The dogfight was more interesting than I had expected. At that moment, Matthew called. "Miss Moretti, the results of the emergency board meeting just came in. Alexander has been officially fired, and Vittorio Blackwood has been hospitalized with a heart attack. The stock has hit another maximum drop." Matthew chuckled slightly. "We now own 18% of the shares. With the support of a few small shareholders, that's enough to launch a hostile takeover bid." "Not enough yet." I went to the window. The night was dark as ink. "I want to see Blackwood Construction completely collapse." After the call, I opened the safe and took out a long hidden document. It was a copy of my mother's diary. It detailed the entire process of how my mother discovered evidence of the Blackwood and Vance families' crimes. The date on the last page was the day before she died. "Mom, soon. None of them will escape." The next morning, Lucas knocked urgently on the door. "Miss Sophia, there's a problem. Alexander and Clara are missing. The villa has been ransacked." I stood up abruptly. Around 3 a.m. The guard was knocked out, and the camera recordings were erased. Lucas handed me a tablet, but a camera in an alley caught them getting into a silver van. In the blurry footage, Alexander and Clara could be seen being dragged into a van by men in black. They didn't seem to be going willingly. "They're not our men," I frowned. "Check the license plate." "Fake!" Lucas shook his head. But the van headed towards the port. I immediately called my father, but a strange man's voice answered. "Miss Moretti, if you want to see your father and your husband again, come to warehouse number 3 at the port, alone. If not..." The phone went dead. I could hear Alexander's terrified screams in the background. At the abandoned warehouse by the pier, the sea breeze carried the smell of salt. I stood in the darkness, toying with the small pistol hidden in my sleeve. The cool metal calmed me slightly. Lucas and 6 bodyguards were scattered around, ready to move. "Miss Sophia, reconnaissance is complete," I heard Lucas's voice in my earpiece. 2 men at the front door, 2 at the back. 4 in total. Unknown faces. They don't look like local criminals. "Where's Dad?" Confirmed with the thermal camera. 4 people inside. 2 standing, 2 seated. One of the seated figures has a build similar to the Don's. I took a deep breath and pressed my earpiece. Execute the plan. After 5 minutes, from the back door of the warehouse, I heard faint thuds and the sound of something falling. I took the opportunity to approach the front door and deliberately stepped on a piece of glass. "Who's there?" I heard a suspicious voice from inside. "I'm Sophia Moretti. You told me to come alone." I raised my voice. With a screech, the iron door opened and a gun was pointed at my forehead. The man holding the gun was a giant with a menacing look. A scar under his left eye was particularly disturbing. "Search her," he ordered. I meekly raised my hands and let another man pat me down. They took my phone and wallet but didn't find the knife hidden in my underwear or the gun in my sleeve. "Get in!" The man with the scar pushed me. The warehouse was dark and damp. A single light bulb hanging in the center was the only source of light. Underneath it, a man in a black trench coat sat with his back to me. Armed goons flanked him. On the floor, Alexander and Clara were huddled, their hands tied behind their backs, mouths gagged. Their faces were covered in blood. There was no sign of my father. "Miss Moretti, I've heard so much about you." The man in the trench coat slowly turned, a face I had never seen. Around 40, with a sharp nose and a long scar crossing his cheek to his neck. "Where is my father?" I asked directly. The man smiled, showing yellow teeth. "Don Vincent will be fine. I called you today to make you a proposal." "What proposal?" "The territories left by the Blackwood and Vance families," he said, skillfully twirling a butterfly knife between his fingers. "Miss Moretti, you brought them down in a most elegant fashion recently. My boss liked that." "And who is your boss?" "That's not important," he said, standing and approaching Alexander, pressing the tip of his knife to his cheek. "What's important is that we can cooperate. You get your revenge, and we get their businesses. What do you say?" Alexander, terrified, widened his eyes and made muffled noises, shaking his head. Clara had already fainted. I sneered. "You kidnapped my husband just to make me a cooperation proposal? Otherwise, we wouldn't have the honor of hosting someone like you, Miss Moretti," the man shrugged. "Besides, consider it a favor. We took care of this snake who tried to have you run over." I slowly walked to the center. The sound of my heels on the concrete was sharp and clear. "Let me guess, you're from the rival syndicate, the Wolves, right? I heard you recently lost a lot of business in Asia because of my father." The man's face stiffened slightly, and the knife stopped moving. "Miss Moretti is well informed." "That's not all," I said, stopping 3 meters from him. "I also know about the shipment arriving at this port tonight. By now, an anonymous tip has already reached the FBI." "You bitch!" The enraged man lunged at me with the knife, but at that moment, the warehouse ceiling suddenly exploded, and a dozen smoke grenades fell. A pungent smoke filled the warehouse in an instant. Gunshots, screams, footsteps all mixed in a pandemonium. "Miss Sophia, get down!" I heard Lucas's voice in my earpiece. I dropped to the floor and pulled the gun from my sleeve. In the smoke, the man with the scar passed by me. I shot him in the knee. He collapsed, screaming. 5 minutes later, when the smoke cleared, a dozen bodyguards armed to the teeth had control of the situation. The man in the trench coat and his goons were on the floor, and Alexander and Clara were leaning against a corner like dead dogs. "The Don is on his way." Lucas dusted off my clothes. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." I approached Alexander and violently ripped the gag from his mouth. "Honey, your friends don't seem very reliable." Alexander, between tears and snot, begged, "Sophia, save me. Those animals want to kill me." A pity they didn't succeed. I stood up and told Lucas, "Take them to the precinct. Charges, kidnapping, and attempted murder." "Attempted murder?" Lucas asked, puzzled. I pointed to a camera in a corner of the warehouse. I just recorded their confession. They also admitted to planning yesterday's car accident. Hearing those words, Alexander suddenly screamed, "Sophia, you're a devil! This was all your setup!" Lucas kicked him. I shook my head and called my father. "Dad, it's all taken care of." The wolves tried to interfere. "Yes, I've already notified the FBI. I'll wait for you." After hanging up, I walked out of the warehouse. The morning sun, just rising on the horizon, gilded the port. In the distance, police sirens were approaching, and from the other direction, my father's cars were arriving. 4 days later, an earthquake shook the financial world of New York. The Moretti Group officially announced the acquisition of Blackwood Construction. As the group's heir, I held a press conference where I exposed Blackwood Construction's long-standing corruption. That same day, the police raided the Vance Group headquarters and arrested George Vance on multiple charges, including smuggling and bribery. My image, answering journalists' questions in front of the Blackwood Construction building, was on the front page of every newspaper. A Chanel suit, my mother's red diamond necklace, and a confident demeanor. An image completely different from the protagonist of a tragedy who, 6 months ago, was locked in a storage room with a broken leg. Miss Moretti, as the new president, will you keep the current management? A journalist asked. I smiled. Of course not. Blackwood Construction needs a complete overhaul, from its leadership to its corporate culture. It said your husband, Alexander Blackwood, is accused of embezzlement and inciting murder. What do you have to say? The law will deliver a fair verdict, I said with a solemn expression. Personally, I feel deep regret and sadness for Mr. Blackwood's actions. After the press conference, Matthew was waiting for me in the boardroom. Miss Moretti, here are the final acquisition documents. They just need your signature. I looked at the documents and suddenly became curious. Mr. Reed, why are you helping me? Is it just because of my father? Matthew adjusted his glasses. At first, yes. But, he hesitated, a rare occurrence for him. I came to admire your courage and intelligence. I smiled and signed the documents. Blackwood Construction, now Moretti Holdings, I entrust to you. I hope it becomes a truly responsible company. Where are you going? Matthew asked. I'm going to visit an old friend, I said, looking at my watch. They arrested Alexander this morning. I need to comfort him. The prison visiting room was cold and silent. Alexander wore an orange jumpsuit, his beard long, his eyes bloodshot. When he saw me, he rushed at the bulletproof glass, but was restrained by a guard. "Sophia, you devil!" he screamed, banging on the glass. I calmly picked up the receiver. "Alexander, your charges are embezzlement, fraud, incitement to murder. In total, you'll be in prison for at least 20 years. Oh, by the way, Clara has decided to testify against you. She provided all the evidence proving that you and George Vance planned the murder of the evicted tenants." Alexander's face turned pale. "It's a lie. It was all that old man Vance's doing." Of course. I pulled out a recorder and pressed play. In the recording, Alexander clearly says, "Send some guys to teach those protesters a lesson. I don't care if someone dies." "It's fake! That recording is fake!" Alexander screamed. "The judge won't think so." And about the baby Clara lost, the DNA test results came back. It wasn't my child. Alexander remained motionless, as if struck by lightning. "Then whose was it?" "Your father's," I finished harshly. Clara confessed it herself. Alexander collapsed onto the chair as if his soul had fled his body. "Finally, Blackwood Construction is mine. All the shares in your name and your father's were used to cover the funds you embezzled and to compensate the victims." Leaving the prison, the sun was blinding. Lucas was waiting for me by the car. "Miss Sophia, the Don wants you at the estate. He says he has something important to tell you." "All right." I got into the car. In 6 months, from a victim of a failed marriage, I had become the heir of a billion-dollar organization. The joy of revenge was slowly fading, leaving behind a sense of emptiness. "Mom, can you see me? Everyone who hurt you has paid." The phone vibrated. A message from Matthew. New development. George Vance died in prison from a heart attack. The autopsy showed traces of a chronic poison in his system. I looked at the screen and smiled slowly. My father had planned everything. "Lucas, tell Dad I'll be there for dinner tonight, and contact the Swiss bank to schedule an appointment to deposit my mother's necklace in a safe deposit box." "Yes, Miss Sophia." Outside the window, the city skyline glittered at sunset. My era was just beginning. On the top floor of the Moretti International Building, formerly Blackwood Construction, I held a glass of whiskey and watched the magnificent night view of New York. It had been 3 months since Alexander's imprisonment and the company's takeover. I was there almost every night, but it still didn't feel real. "President Moretti, here is today's financial report." Matthew entered and placed a document on my desk. "After resuming the Hudson Yards project, sales are exceeding expectations. Good work, Director Reed." I took a sip of whiskey. Matthew didn't leave but came closer. "You haven't attended any meetings for a week. The board of directors is worried." "What are they worried about? That I'll run off with the money?" I sneered. "They're worried about you." Matthew's voice became unusually gentle. After achieving revenge, many people fall into a sense of emptiness. Only then did I turn to look at him. Matthew wasn't wearing his glasses. He had bags under his eyes, and his tie was loose, an image completely different from his usual professional demeanor. "It looks like you're the one who needs a break. Want a drink?" He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. We drank in silence. "Why did you help me?" "Was it really just because of my father?" I asked suddenly. Matthew swirled his glass. "At first, it was because of a debt I owed the Don." He looked up, his eyes burning. "But now, it's because I admire who you are, Sophia Moretti." My heart sank. I immediately looked away. "Don't joke like that." "It's not a joke." Matthew put down his glass and pulled a small box from his jacket. "This is a brooch your mother entrusted to my father. Now, it returns to its rightful owner." I opened the box. Inside was a finely crafted pearl brooch. It was clearly a set with my mother's black pearl necklace. "My father told me that 20 years ago, after that fire, your mother saved your father. This brooch was the only memento your mother left." "Fire? What fire?" "Didn't the Don tell you? 20 years ago, the Vance chemical plant exploded. 3 neighboring districts were destroyed." The glass in my hand suddenly felt heavy. My mother's death had occurred right after that incident. I need to see my mother's diary. I put down the glass and grabbed my coat to leave. "Wait," Matthew stopped me. "I discovered the real reason Vittorio Blackwood was sending money to Clara. It wasn't for her, but for George Vance. Vittorio was buying his silence for participating in your mother's murder 20 years ago." The USB drive in my hand felt cold. 20 years ago again, the darkest period of my life. Tomorrow, I will talk to my father and ask everything. In the attic of my father's estate, in a dusty box, I found my mother's brown leather diary, the 3rd of May, 1998. I got the decisive evidence. The scene of Claudio Vance killing a protester at the construction site. Tomorrow, I will report him. May 4. Vittorio Blackwood came. He wanted to buy the film roll at a high price. I refused. When he left, his gaze was terrifying. "He's following me." I hid a copy of the film roll in the diary. There, the writing stopped. The last page was torn. I rummaged through the box and found a piece of an old photograph. My mother, Vittorio Blackwood, and Claudio Vance were posing in front of a sign that read Vance Chemicals. On the back of the photo was a small note. "Shareholders meeting. Vance Chemicals. February 1997. My mother's maiden name was Conti. My father's was Moretti. Could my mother have been a shareholder?" At that moment, Lucas called. "Miss Sophia, the Don is in the hospital. Heart attack." In the hospital corridor, the red light of the operating room stayed on. It had been 3 hours since my father went in. "What happened?" "We don't know." After a meeting with representatives of the Wolves, he suddenly clutched his chest. An old member said, "Miss Sophia, the Don hid something from you. The fire, 20 years ago, was an attempt on his life. Claudio Vance wanted to eliminate a competitor and collect the insurance." At that moment, the operating room door opened, and the doctor came out. "He's past the critical stage, but he only has 6 months left." I entered the room. My father was surrounded by machines. "Sophia, did you find the diary?" "Yes. Where is the film roll Mom hid?" "In the study at the estate. Under the 3rd floor tile." "Sophia, the commission is entrusted to you." "No, don't think such things." "No, listen." My father gripped my hand tightly. "Vance is dead, but the Wolves won't stop. Either you face them in an all-out war, or you disband the organization. The commission is too dirty. It's no place for a woman like you. Sophia, don't become like me." I removed the 3rd floor tile in the study. Underneath was a rusty metal box. Inside were several film rolls and a letter. My mother's letter. "To my dearest Sophia, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer in this world. Don't be too sad. This was my choice. Revenge does not bring peace, only justice can. Yours forever, Mom." I fell to the floor, sobbing. At that moment, a message from Matthew arrived. "I've discovered something. Your mother didn't die from a fall. She was strangled and then thrown from the roof." The next morning, I gathered the organization's senior members in my office. "You all know my father's situation. I want to hear your opinion on the future of the commission." One of the old-timers, Donato, spoke up. "According to the rules, Miss Sophia should take over. But right now, with the threat from the wolves, it's a crisis situation. We need a strong leader." "Are you saying I'm not fit?" "No offense, but the organization is not like a business." "I understand." I pressed a button on my desk. Lucas and armed bodyguards entered. "You have 3 options. 1. Help me turn the commission into a legitimate security company. 2. Take a severance package and leave. 3. I pulled a folder from the drawer. "Surrender to the police. All your dealings are documented here." In the end, most of the old-timers chose retirement. Donato, furious, left, vowing to join the wolves. "Lucas, keep an eye on Donato and arrange a meeting with the leader of the wolves." That afternoon, I went with Matthew to the Hudson Yards construction site. It had become a beautiful park filled with the laughter of children. "This is what your mother would have wanted to see," Matthew said. In that moment, I understood. My mother had left my father not because she didn't love him, but because she wanted the next generation to live free from violence and hatred. "Sophia." Matthew suddenly knelt and pulled a ring from his pocket. "I know it's too soon to say this, but I want to officially start courting you. Give me some time." I covered his mouth, my eyes welling with tears. "Once I've sorted things out with my father and the commission, I'll wait as long as it takes." He stood up and gently hugged me. A few days later, my father had heart surgery. In the hallway outside the operating room, I played with my mother's black pearl necklace. Fortunately, the surgery was a success. That afternoon, I met Gianni, the leader of the wolves, at the Pierre Hotel. The commission will be disbanded and turned into a legitimate security company. We will cede a portion of the territories left by the Vance family to you, on one condition: you abandon all illegal businesses. After a tense negotiation, Gianni agreed to the proposal. Returning to the hospital, my father was awake. I showed him my mother's letter and the evidence. He cried, "I as good as killed her." "No, Dad. It's over now." My father pulled a document from under his pillow. "Sign it. The commission is yours now. It was a will leaving me all his assets." The last page contained a clause. If Sophia Moretti marries Matthew Reed, 10% of the shares will be transferred to Matthew Reed. My father laughed for the first time in a long time. "That boy is a good one. Much better than the son-in-law your mother chose for me." A month later, Moretti Security was officially launched. At a press conference, I announced that 10% of the profits from the Hudson Yards project would be donated to charity. "President Moretti, it's rumored your father founded the commission. Is that true?" "Yes." My father once lost his way, but he spent the rest of his life trying to right that wrong. Moretti Security will offer a chance to all who, like him, want a new beginning. After the press conference, Matthew took me to the Central Park at Hudson Yards. "Sophia, I've been thinking for a long time." He knelt and pulled out an old diamond ring. This ring was my grandmother's. She told me to give it to the person who could end our family's painful history. I thought of my mother's letter. Justice, not revenge. "Yes. But on one condition. You turn the top floor of the old Blackwood construction building into a children's library named after my mother." Matthew slid the ring onto my finger and kissed the back of my hand. Of course, on our wedding day, my father walked me down the aisle. Matthew was waiting for me at the end, his eyes full of love. I had tied my mother's black pearl necklace to my bouquet. On our honeymoon, I whispered to Matthew, "I think I'm pregnant. If it's a girl, I want to name her after my mother, Eleanor." Matthew held me tight. "Thank you, Sophia, for breaking this terrible chain of hatred." In the distance, the dawn of a new day was breaking. My mother's pearls shimmered under the starlight, like a period marking the end of everything and the beginning of everything else.